Hi, everyone. Stephanie Battolino here. Welcome to another edition of Walk the Walk and Talk the Talk. Been on a hiatus for a couple of weeks. It's great to be back. And what I wanted to share in this episode is kind of the educational model that I use when I am training and when I'm speaking. And this is something that's been kind of foundational for as long as I've been doing the work that I'm doing, which is about 16 years now. So where it all starts and where the kind of the first block, if you will, in the model is, it all begins and ends with education. It's interesting. When I first started doing this work, again, like 16 years ago, I honestly thought that the companies and the organizations that I would work with would be woke at some point in time, 5, 6, 7 years later, who knows? And that I wouldn't have anyone to work with anymore because all the companies would be woke and everybody would be, you know, well on their way to their diversity, equity, and inclusion journeys. And I'd have to come up with some sort of like hobby, like learn how to fish or something like that. Well, that's not going to happen. But what I found out and what I've realized, especially lately in the work that I've been doing, in this past year or so, is that what I didn't count on is that there were a lot of companies that weren't in existence when I first started doing the work. Companies that are really only just starting out on their diversity, equity, and inclusion journeys. And what they're trying to do from the very outset, and I applaud this, of course, is they want to build as big a tent as they can for everyone of all stripes. And then that's really where I come in and help them do that work with respect to the trans and the non-binary community. So it all begins with education. The need for education is great. It will never go away, especially today, I think, in our society. It's so fractured and so divisive. There's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it's very important that we educate and we create a human connection. So that's the bottom part and bottom block. And really from that, my hope is that education leads to a higher level of understanding, and understanding is that second block. And then ultimately we reach the third block, the third tier, if you will. And I hope that the understanding sows the seeds of acceptance. So it's education, understanding, acceptance. Simple model, as valid today as it was 16 years ago when I first started doing the work. But when we talk about education and we talk about training specifically, there's so much that we need to consider, I think, on the receiving end of that training. How much in your own mind and in your own heart are you creating space for the learning, right? And I think that that is very, very important. And I think what's really kind of rooted in creating that space for the learning, for the understanding, for the acceptance is vulnerability. You know, we don't know everything about everything. I don't know everything about everything. And I doubt that you know everything about everything. Well, let's just recognize that and say, wait, there's things I need to understand. And I think it's from that vulnerability. And that's hard for people. I get it. I get it. But it's in creating that vulnerability that you then open yourself up to learning. Perfect example of this for me. And I talk about it in the book, Reflections from Both Sides of the Glass Ceiling, available now and everywhere. It's actually I have a promotional discount running now on my website, stephaniebattolino.com. I'd love for you to stop by. And if you haven't purchased the book, I would love for you to do that. If you've heard about it or if you've read it, certainly refer a friend. That would be great. But there's a story that I talk about in the book that gets to this whole vulnerability thing. And it goes back to right after we had, a couple of years after, I guess, after we had founded the first LGBTQ employee resource group at New York Life. And we had we were turning over to a new executive sponsor, and we had this executive sponsor come in, straight white guy, but like in the top tier of the company, C-suite of the company. He volunteered, and I'll never forget what he said. He walked into our leadership meeting, and he sat down, and and by and large, this is what he said. He goes, "Look, I'm a straight white guy. I don't know anything about your community, but I want to learn. I want to be supportive, and I want to help you achieve your mission." Now, if that's not a perfect example of vulnerability, a person in power, a white guy with all this white male privilege saying, wait a minute, I don't know anything. I might know a lot of things about how to run this company or the portion of the company that I'm responsible for. But when it comes to your community, I know nothing, but I am standing here saying, I want to help. I'm an ally. I'm an advocate. And, it's almost like you want to take that, right? And you want to just turn it into pixie dust and spread it all over the world. I mean, and we did great things together while he was our executive sponsor. So just a little story on vulnerability. I think it's very important. It's at the root of all learning. Now that I'm back from hiatus, I'll be doing more of these episodes of Walk the Walk and Talk the Talk. Please please subscribe, tell your friends, send the link around, whatever. But it's been great to be back. My name is Stephanie Battolino, and we'll see you next time.